Thank you, Dennis. That was a very comprehensive and interesting presentation. We'll take 5-10 minutes for questions and then we'll have lunch. So, any questions? Okay, there's one there, I think.
Could I just ask, Dennis, in your explanation of the restrictions on the teaching of Kurdish, I may have forgotten the slide exactly, but I think you said that to teach Kurdish you have to have a bachelor's degree and you have to be a Turkish citizen.
Yeah.
Now, in what respects are they actually restrictions upon people speaking Kurdish? Because those conditions are quite easy to satisfy, even for Kurds, are they not?
The problem is there is no Kurdish department when they made that law. There wasn't Kurdish department in Turkey, and there is no undergraduate Kurdish department in any university in Turkey.
All right, so there's no job for them to do. They can get
basically, there is nowhere to go to get a graduation. Basically, there is no department to go and register the Kurdish language and be graduated. And secondly, like when they put the legislation in act, basically there was a lot of Kurdish teachers who can voluntarily go from Europe and teach, whereas there was a lot of teachers in Turkey in Kurdish, but they didn't allow them. They put barrier in front of them in order that they don't return back. The state want to create their own Kurdish teachers, basically. Like they want to create something like Kurdish television, which they put in broadcasting, like to assimilate the people in their language now. I think that's what was the aim of the state, and in 6 times they try to find the people who can teach for them, and still they haven't found them. That's one of the reasons why they can't go with it.
May I make 2 contributions to your explanation? In Turkey, when we need new teachers in the past, they just have had some graduate students, thousands of them, and rapidly gave them a course, and then they appointed them as a teacher. So they could have same practical example in Turkey, that if they need really, if they want to teach Kurdish in the schools, there are lots of Kurdish origin teachers that they could teach Kurdish in the schools, and 3 months, 6 months will be enough for them to train them quickly and to appoint them as a teacher of Kurdish language or other minority languages too. And the second issue, why Kurdish language is not became a second language or minority language in Turkey, it's just a matter of having this dividing Turkey, or Turkish nation. This is the main concern that the state are focusing on. That's why we have to be Turks, and this TRT 6, it's interesting. Turkish TRT established by law, so it has a law. And when you have a new channel, you have to issue it or you have to change law. So Turkish TRT is simply an illegal state TV channel. It's not more, because they didn't make necessary amendments to the Turkish TRT law, or broadcasting in Kurdish is still illegally done by Turkey.
Short comment.
Okay.
When we are mentioning about the implementation problems in Turkey, but also this is the same when we are mentioning about the European Court also, since my experiences, in Kurdish alphabet, we have also X, Q, and W articles. And when we transferred all these cases to the European Court, which the domestic law or the administrative offices reject to accept all these Kurdish names, we transferred the case files to the European Court, and again they rejected the applications by referring, okay, you are Kurds and you have your own right to give the Kurdish names to your children, But please do use or do choose the names in Kurdish, which does not include X or W or Q, etc. I have given a lot of examples also regarding the torture cases, even the cases about right to life, cultural rights, etc. So everything is changing also from the European side, even it is a European Court of Human Rights, when you compare the decisions or judgments in 90s and today.
I just want to say something. I think like we have to look at my friends when they talk about their the displacement or right to life. They have mentioned a lot of it at the European Court of Human Rights which relate to Turkey. But when we look at the languages, because the Turkey's minority regime is very interesting. When they say that there is a minority provision in the international instruments, either they will derogate it from that provision, or if the provision, the whole instrument is related to minority, like framework Convention of National Minorities, for example, they wouldn't sign it. As a result of that, they don't make the issue to become international. But despite that, the European Court of Human Rights, I think in Tamer case, it was really great by using the discrimination principles. They make them to show that they violated the rules. Yeah.
Thank you. We'll take a last question over here.
Yeah, I have two questions, if that's possible. We were talking about displaced people, we were talking about disappearing people, killed. I just wanted to ask a question. Who are these people? Who are these people who are disappeared or killed? Are they more educated people, more representatives of people, or I assume are ordinary people as well? Yeah, probably for Dennis. And for you, this question probably you will be more familiar with that. Yeah, and for Darren, are these international institutions compatible to deal with problem of Kurdish people in Turkey, or are these institutions prisoner of something that international relations were in 1945 or in the past? Is there call for innovations probably? Thank you.
Just in relation to who are the displaced, I'm not sure I will speak on the disappeared.
Yeah.
When we speak of internally displaced persons, there is a danger that we homogenise the victims of internal displacement. We have to recognise that internally displaced are young, old, men, women, children, who are disabled. When we look at the legal responses to displacement in Turkey, we see that there is no mention of gender, for instance. There's no engagement with who these people actually are. There is a very depoliticised discourse, a very technical, bureaucratic response to dealing with displacement. I'm guilty this morning of not giving voices to the displaced. This is something that has been picked up that perhaps some local NGOs in Turkey also could give more to the voices of the displaced. But on that, it is important to say there is a lot being done to go and hear from them. And it has been very long coming, but we need to see who these people are. They need to be made visible in some way. In terms of whether these international institutions are able, and you mentioned a prisoner to international relations, procedurally the ECHR has long been limited. It cannot, for instance, engage with the minority position of Kurds in Turkey, of Catholics in Northern Ireland. There is no engagement with these broader principles of democracy and the rule of law. Perhaps it's a benefit that the European Court provides a technical, legalistic process in some respects. That should mitigate claims that it is a politicised process. That doesn't always work, and it didn't in the Turkish cases. There are institutional limitations, but I think when you look at the idea of allowing direct petitions from Diyarbakir to Strasbourg, when you look at fact-finding, there are things the European Court can do when it wants to. There are some signs that diplomacy and pragmatism get in the way, of course. there's no international court that can say that it hasn't faced the same problem. The European Court certainly could have done a little bit more in terms of how it addressed these violations through its technical legal language. But it's the political will at the Council of Europe was more the problem in dealing with the conflict in Turkey. There was no interstate claim, as we know, had states, well, since 1982, had states followed through on the initial interstate claim regarding the 1980 coup and the issue of torture. Perhaps this wouldn't have been left to individual victims, left to the Human Rights Association of Turkey and to the KHRP to try and fashion some sort of record of what is going on. The lack of political will in actually bringing this to attention is extremely problematic. The way in which the 1982 interstate case was resolved through a friendly settlement was equally problematic and led to very soft oversight of what was going on in Turkey. Giving effect to the disappearances, unlawful killings, torture, and village destruction cases, you have to wonder what role a court can play in actually giving effect to those judgments. One of the points I'm trying to make with the compensation law is we know to some degree just the severity of what happened, we know the scale of what happened, and we know the complexities of dealing with that. The European Court of Human Rights, for instance, is not necessarily that it is that much more limited in practice than the Inter-American Court has been in dealing with massacre cases in Colombia, for instance. Diplomacy is there and it should be there to put pressure on the state. As it is up to the local conditions and the local political process as to what can be achieved. It depends very much on relationships between the state, the government, the judiciary, the prosecutors, the military. Had the Council of Europe threatened to expel Turkey if it did not stop the conflict, what would have happened? So, there's no easy answer to your question. There's a very long-winded one, it seems, but they did what we can expect of them. The court really should have considered dealing with the notion that there was a generalized practice in some of these serious violations. What impact would that have had, I guess, is the more cynical question that we would have to face.
I was comparing the situation just about 10 years ago in former Yugoslavia, suppose. You had Kosovo, who by Human Rights Council of Europe were cases against leaders, suppose, of Republic of Serbia. So that was one of the reasons why I asked who are disappeared, suppose. Are they because of their certain ethnicity, because of leadership, because or just ordinary people? Then displaced people, suppose, in Kosovo was a result of NATO intervention even. So how far that
I think what I said in my presentation was that we have no grasp of how big the disappeared issue is. But from the few cases that have been able to come before the court, it appears that it goes across a wide range of people, everybody from educated politicians, journalists, activists, even to just normal people who want to just get on with their lives and live a peaceful one at that. And also in relation to, I think you asked whether the institutions were appropriate. As Darren rightly said, there are definite limitations to it. The reality of the situation is we live in a very politically charged world, right down to the schoolyard, right up to key institutions like the UN and the European Court. So I think that in relation to how appropriate they are, I think they're appropriate within their limitations. I do think that they are kept a prisoner to some extent, but that said, I don't think that we should reject them completely. I think you should try, and I think Darren already touched upon, the real change is going to come at a domestic level, but hopefully international influence can help push that forward. And I would also say that other institutions that you could look to are also the UN, but that you're also relying on them to play by their own rules, which they don't always, as was shown in Kosovo.
Okay, I'm very sorry that we don't have much time left, so we will take a quick last question there, and we can continue after lunch with the discussion.
Denise, thank you very much. The dimension that is missing is the political dimension. In a nutshell, we have to also be careful not to orientalize Turkey. What the Kemalist state was doing was exactly the same thing as the French Jacobin state did to all its national minorities. The French state was successful, the Turkish state was not. So the issue is political. The issue is that the failure to recognize that there are national minorities and that the changes that are taking place at the moment are quite significant. In the last 10, 15 years, there were more changes than there were in the previous 40 or 50. One of the issues that I wanted to ask you about is the cause of the Kurdish language is now being taken by even conservatives. Take the case of the Saman newspaper, which is now publishing a supplement in the Kurdish language. There is now a perception that the Kurdish language is an arena for struggle between different understandings of what should be the nature of the Turkish state. And also we have to accept that there are representatives, and very sophisticated representative women in particular, in the Constitutional Committee representing the BDP, that are putting forward quite forcefully the position of the BDP, Ayla Atta, for example, and all this is showing that there is some kind of movement and change which is political and is not entirely captured by a sort of a narrow understanding of the legal dimension of the issue.
I'm completely agree that the issue in Turkey is political because the constitution which I referred is made by the military coup. After the military coup, is a military constitution, it is not civil and democratic constitutions. It doesn't only affect Kurds, it affects everybody in Turkey, but Kurds are the most victim people in Turkey of this constitution because this constitution keep using this constitution against the Kurds in any of the civil activity. But I'm completely agree that the issue is political and the only political solution, I think, to accept the Kurdish as a side of the conflict and to deal with them, to accept the fundamental change rather than to make basic reforms and just get a time for 1 year and 2 years and keep violating the other side by using different articles of the constitutions. That's the reason why I'm in favor of that. We need a new constitution which is democratic, which is made by civilians.